Hello, everyone, and welcome to this session we're having now about how we came about creating a Microsoft Teams learning portal in a day. There we go. There we go. So first, I want to start out with some practical info. First of all, you have your little panel in your right-hand side from the GoToWebinar. In here, there is a question part and a chat part where you can add in questions if you have any questions during the session. At the end, we will get to answering some of the questions. There will also be a 5-minute break in between the sessions. This conference is, of course, being recorded, and we will distribute it afterwards to you. And of course, if you have any technical questions or any other requests, well, then you can go to the hub. And also, if you figure out of a question later on about the session here, and you didn't have the time or the opportunity to ask it in the session, well, then you can always go to the hub also and ask these questions there, and we'll be sitting by afterwards the session here and answer the questions. So when that is set, welcome to how to create a full learning portal for Microsoft Teams in a day. Now, this session here, I will go about how I actually created one and how I had the ability to deploy this. So first of all, the task I was given was that if it would be possible to create a full learning portal for Microsoft Teams, I have one day to do it in, and I needed to do it in multiple languages. So how much would be possible to actually create, and could you do this in such a short amount of time? So I accepted the challenge, and I am a bit old school. So the way that I started out with was that I started out by doing a mind map. So I took a piece of paper, and the idea is that you have 15 minutes where you just keep writing any idea that comes into mind and structure it a little bit. And after these 15 minutes, this is your idea or the ideas. So I started out by typing in Microsoft Teams in the middle, and then I just popped in all kinds of things that I could think of when we were talking about Microsoft Teams. That actually turned into afterwards a list of features where I could simply say, well, this and this and this, I could connect together to a feature that could become recordings for me. So I had kind of a structured an idea about what was I'm about to record to create this portal. Then I looked at all the new recordings or the features that I had, and then I created a list of categories, which we in ClickLearn call them books. So I kind of had a set of how would I categorize these different recordings. And when I've done that, well, then I turned to ClickLearn. So the initial setup, well, I started out by creating a new project in ClickLearn. So I had a clean sheet, nothing else to worry about but the ones that I was going to create in here. Then I actually created the shelf, which is a bit backwards, but I knew that I was going to create a learning portal for Microsoft Teams. So I created one called Microsoft Teams. And then after that, I actually created all the books because I created that list of categories that I was about to go through. So this way, I actually already had something to look at. I'm no longer looking at a blank piece of paper, so to say, inside ClickLearn, but I had something to work with. And then I logged into Teams. Now, the first thing that caught me, or the first obstacle, that was the GDPR. Because what I initially had thought would be an easy peasy way of doing it, just going in, doing the two things that I do normally. My system is, of course, the ones that I use internally in our company. So that was filled up with all kinds of calendar meetings, chats, and internal Teams channels. So I couldn't use that one, of course. So So I thought about the Microsoft that just put out this new free version for ClickLearn. So actually, no, not for ClickLearn, for Teams. So I created a free account and signed up for that one. And then I thought, now I'm ready. But I came into the same problem again because even though the free account looks very much like the one that we normally use in enterprise terms, it did not have a calendar. And a lot of my recordings had to do with setting up meetings, doing live events, and things like this. So I needed that calendar to kind of engage with creating the meetings. So I went to my admin, and then I asked him, could you please create 2 dummy accounts in our organization, but without any links to our data? So it's completely empty accounts. Luckily, he was able to do that, and I now had a system that I could engage with. So now I was ready to do the recording. Now, appearance is everything. And when we go into the system, to the web application of Teams, well, then there is the browser head, there's the searches and all that. And I really didn't want that in there because when we're capturing the screen captures, I don't want that when we go into the video material or into the PowerPoint presentation. So I wanted a tight screen view. And there is actually a very neat function within Microsoft where you can do this. So I went to Start, and then I type in Run so I can run an application. And I put in this little URL sentence here. What it looks like is if I just go out here and I go down here into Start and I type run that one, you can see that the line that I have up here is actually the one that I also have down here. It's the one that I have down here too. So when I do this and I click on that one, then ClickLearn Team will open up as an application, but it's still the web version that I'm running here. But it gives me a very tight screen view. I'll come up here. So now I had a very, very nice tight screen to capture. Okay. So now I had the system I'm running. I had all my initial setups. Now we're ready to record. So when I'm recording, some of the things that you need to be aware of and some of the things that I encountered doing this was, of course, be sure to align your recordings so that you, of course, first create a team and then create a channel and not the other way around. So it makes sense as you go through the processes. Try the process before you do the recording because it will save you some time. It's not always that we do the processes. So sometimes it's a good way just to refresh that you're ready. So when you do the recording, it comes out smoothly. Secondly, when you've done the recording and you're ready, then go in and actually structure your recording right away. So I went directly in there, set up with chapters and notes, grouped the screen captures together that I wanted to group together. So I was already engaging with the process right away. And then I went back because since I knew I was going to do this on multiple languages, I knew that I was going to use the replay function. It's one of the advanced features that we have in ClickLearn where we can have ClickLearn run through the entire process automatically and recapture everything for us. So before you start setting up replays, clean your system. So if you created a team, well then go in and delete that team. So when you do the replay, ClickLearn can recapture it during the process. Replay the process and then go back and proofread what you've just walked through. So everything is looking as it is. And when you've done this, add it to the book that has already been created, because then it's kind of out of the way, even though you still need to go back to it maybe later on. Since I knew I was going to do this in multiple languages, there is 2 ways of doing it. You can either go in and replay the processes right away. So you have everything created in the multiple languages as you do it, or you can do everything in one language, and then after everything is signed up, then you can go in and replay them in the multiple languages. So there's two ways. But when you do this and you go to do the multiple language, clean up the system again. Be sure that there's nothing in there. Be sure that if you have created a process where you are adding in text, for instance, setting up a meeting, well, then make sure that that text is also being translated in the replay room, so that you don't, so you're not doing a process in a German user interface and then suddenly it says meet up with the team in English, if that's what you call the meeting. So be sure that that is also being translated. Then go in again, change the system, in this case Teams, to the according language that you're about to do the translation to. And then, of course, be sure to clean your ClickLearn connector in the browser, restart your browser, and then if you encounter a process where the click and continue screen comes up, well, instead of going in and recording and replacing it, add the step to it. Because afterwards, when you go into the editor, you can always go in and have that step excluded for the other languages, so it will only be for instance, German. Because if you do the replace step in a replay of a different language, it will override the original step. So now you will have a, for instance, English recording with a German step in the middle. So that's why remember to add the step instead of replacing it in that sense. And then, of course, have anything that you added in manually translated, so you're sure that it's localized correctly. When this is done, well, since you've already added the recordings accordingly to the books, well, then just be sure that the books are also being translated. This means that the titles for each book is translated accordingly to the different languages that you're about to do. So you don't set up a complete portal in 3 different languages, but all the titles are still in English. So be sure to do that. Go into the Content Cloud, create a tracking ID, and add that into the shelf together. While you're setting up your system anyway for your learning portal, well, then also add in the tracking number so you can see how are people engaging with the material that you've created. And now you're actually ready to produce the learning portal, because you only need to produce that portal. You don't need to produce anything as you go about it. So you don't need to do the recordings or the books or anything like that. Just produce that one shelf. And of course, in the languages that you have recorded it in. And then you publish it to the Content Cloud. Copy the URL, and you're ready to share a multi-language learning portal instantly. So I created this one here. This is what I succeeded with for a day. So I started out with the 8 groups that I had here, where it was a little intro to Microsoft Teams, getting your team up and running, collaborating with teams and channels, etc. as we went through this. And I actually managed to create about 20 different recordings to set up for this. Oh, there we go. Close this one down here. And if we go into, let's say, into one of them, how to manage a team, and we're talking about how to share content in teams, well, then here we can see a process completely captured like we always know. I have all my different formats. Everything is available for me. And again, as I said, I actually created this in Danish and in German. So if we go look at the German, for instance, we can look at the same process we just looked at here. And everything is aligned and set up exactly like that. So that's how easy I actually went about. That's how I created a learning portal for one day in multiple languages, and how I structured the way. Actually, that leads us back to the PowerPoint where I have. Is there any questions?
Perfect, Peter. So yeah, guys, now is the time. If you have any questions, you can engage with the questions pane in the GoToWebinar client. Type in your questions. You can also use the chat. It should be open for the same purpose. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in there, and we will take as many of them as we can during the session, and we will follow up on any of them that we miss after the session on the community. Yeah, we have a couple of questions already, so that's fantastic. We have one here we can start with. Peter, can you explain what is the difference between a shelf and a book in ClickLearn?
Yes, I can. So let's just go back here and look at ClickLearn. So in ClickLearn, we have the analogy where we call the entire learning portal, the one that we were looking at here, where everything is structured. This is what we call a shelf. So if you see down here, I have a shelf that is called Microsoft Teams. Inside the shelves here, I have all the different books. So as I said initially, I have created small groupings of interest, and those are the ones that I call books. Inside each of these books, that is where I've added the recordings that I needed for that specific book. So for instance, if I go back out here to the learning portal, we can put that back in English so everybody is following. We have the Teams, which is a shelf. The books are these categories that I have down here. And when I go into one of these books, this is where I have my work instructions or recordings, as we call them. And that's how you have the process that has been aligned exactly like we wanted it structured. Hope that explained it.
Yep. Great. There's another question here. How do you start a new project with no pre-existing recordings?
Well, the way that I do it is that I go in here to Teams. I go into Tools and Preferences. I go over to my Troubleshoot, and this is where I have my recording path. So if I go over here and I create, I, for instance, want to localize mine under my projects here. I want to make a new folder that can be a test for MS Teams, and I press OK. Well, then I have a new recording site for that. I click OK, and it will now update and go into that one. Unfortunately, I just overruled this one. There we go. So now I have a clean project ready for me, clean slate. So as soon as I go in here and create, for instance, a shelf, as I did before, and call this, we can just call it MS Teams, and save it. Well, then it will be added in here, and I can just save it like that. And the same thing, I can go with creating a book, add in the books, and then that will become highlighted. So that's actually how you create a completely new project. Again, you can go up here to Tools and Preferences, move back to another project that you're working on. That could be the Teams that we're looking at just before. Actually, I had that here called. Oh, it is a. And it updates, and I'm back to the other project. So that's how you create a project inside, a clean new project inside Teams.
Yeah, perfect. I think we have time for one more question. How do the users access the content? Do they need to use their Teams login?
There's different ways of doing that. So when you go into the Content Cloud, you can either lock it down. Like this one here is completely public. So anybody who has the URL here can go in and see this portal with the examples that I put up. But you can also, within the Content Cloud, set up Content Federation. That means that you can lock it down, so you need to use a single sign-on or a cloud ID to log into it. And for instance, if you use a single sign-on, it will typically be your Microsoft ID that you have added to it. So the one that you log into, for instance, to Teams and to any other internal of your organization would then also be the login you do there. So it's kind of up to your organization how you want to engage with the material that you've put a password on.
Perfect. All right, thank you so much, Peter, for sharing this session, presenting this session on the Teams portal, and thank you all for listening in. This session will end in 5 seconds. You can stay on the line, of course, if you want to attend the next session, which starts in 5 minutes, or you can go back to the hub page and find your next session in there. We'll see you again in a few minutes. Bye for now.